so we have a special guest tonight for Ageless Education. We have a special Ageless Education session here tonight with somebody some of you might know, Dr. Michael Rose. He is here in the flesh. He's not online, which makes it all the much better. So I'm just gonna, you might know him, you remember him, but I'm gonna introduce it for you guys. And if you're here for the first time, so that you also know what a great guest he's gonna be. We're gonna be listening to him today. So Michael Rose is an distinguished professor of biology at the University of California, Irvine. He has been studying the biology of aging since 1976. He has received several scientific prizes, including the inaugural Bacon Prize in 2019. Yeah. Which is awarded by the not-for-profit Coalition for Radical Life Extension, which People Unlimited is the force behind it. Okay, after more than 300 academic articles and 10 academic books, I'll say that again because that's huge. More than 300 academic articles and 10 academic books. His latest book is Conceptual Breakthroughs in the Evolutionary Biology of Aging. And today he's going to be talking to us about step 4 of the 4 steps to forever. So please help me welcome Dr. Michael Rose.
Am I live? Ooh. Try to tone it down, okay? Just talk normally. Okay. So I love to come here in general, but I also like to come here either virtually or in person. In person is better, of course. To give you my latest ideas, okay? Before I even present them at a scientific meeting or any other context, because you're my people, and any group is going to be amenable to what I have to say. It's going to be you. And if I fail to communicate with you, it won't be because you're resisting ideas like biological immortality, the cessation of aging, indefinite lifespans, and the defeat of aging. Okay. All those are the barriers that I face when I talk outside of this circle. Okay. So I thought I would do something new, which is not use PowerPoint slides. Okay. Because I want to go as slowly and as conversationally as possible. So since about 2016, I've been working on 4 steps to forever, meaning the complete defeat of aging, okay? Making it as minor a part in our lives normally as infection is, as a threat to our continued functioning and survival. And the first part, I'm just going to quickly review what the first 3 steps are. You've heard me talk about them before. Step 1 is the right scientific framework, or you can think of biomedical framework or whatever you want to think of it as. And the number one issue that is foundational to the way I've been thinking for a long time as a scientist, and thanks to you, emotionally, I've been thinking in terms of immortality. All right? Immortality is the number one issue that we have to start with. Now, I thought at the last RADFest that I'd convinced Aubrey de Grey to accept this idea. In the last few weeks, I did an online debate with him where he recanted. He went back. And you can see it online, YouTube. Just look up my name and his name together, and you'll be able to see it. This is such a foundational issue. To me, as a scientist, if I may make a few parallels, okay? So the birth of physics in the 16th century started with the idea of a heliocentric solar system as opposed to a geocentric solar system. We moved from Ptolemy to Copernicus, and then Copernicus begat Galileo and Newton and all of the foundations of physics, okay? That was the key idea. In the birth of 20th century physics, the key idea was that you couldn't go faster than the speed of light. And from that fact, which physicists knew in the late 19th century but didn't want to think about, that was the key fact that Einstein used to give birth to the modern world. That's where E equals mc squared comes from. That's what, perhaps tragically, gave rise to the fission bomb. You've seen Oppenheimer. You've seen that event where E equals mc squared was made manifest first in New Mexico, then in Japan, okay? And the cell phones, the televisions, all this technology that gives the modern world came from the absolute limit to speed being the speed of light, all right? The same thing is true of immortality. In the 1880s, a man called Auguste Weismann, one of the great biologists of the late 19th century, realized that we have immortal germlines because natural selection wants life to keep going. And that means that natural selection is really the controller of aging. Not any kind of organismal physiology falling apart, not any kind of cell mischief going on, not any kind of molecular cumulative deterioration. Right at the foundation of my field, which is the evolutionary biology of aging, we realized that conventional gerontology was wrong, okay? Almost everybody who speaks at a RADFest meeting believes in conventional gerontology and the idea that immortality is off the table. Okay? And even as we started with that premise that natural selection was the thing that determined whether or not there would be any aging at all, we didn't realize at first, and this was like in the 1960s, that in fact aging would stop. In the 1990s, the data showing this was published, but nobody believed it, not even the authors. They didn't think that what they were seeing with their own eyes was the cessation of aging and the beginning of a phase of biological immortality. And I didn't either at first, even though I came from a totally different tradition. And I thought about that for 2 years. And then I realized that the way I'd been thinking was wrong. That the most fundamental thing in aging is that it stops. And the timing of when it stops and the particulars of how it stops, that was the foundation on which to build a brand new approach to aging, both scientifically and in our lives. Okay? So the first step on the 4 steps to forever is accepting immortality. Okay? Step 1. And the science behind that, like you guys don't need to worry about the science behind it because you already have that inside of you. All right? Step 2, living for, by, with immortality. Like, if you're going to truly embrace this central scientific fact, this premise, okay, and this was hard for me too, right? You have to emotionally take on what it means that aging stops, that it's not just going to continue until it destroys you, okay? That is not required. But we know from massive data that when you transition to immortality depends on your diet and lifestyle and your genetic ancestry. So if you are a regular American of Eurasian ancestry and you eat a crap American diet, it's known as the Standard American Diet, SAD, you will not stop aging until you're 105, and your chances of reaching that age are minuscule. 1 in tens of thousands. If you eat an organic agricultural diet, massive data show that your aging will stop when you're 90. You'll be in much better shape than you would have been at 105 on the SAD diet, but you'll be 90 years old. What I realized about 15 years ago is there was a third option, which is that you go back still farther in time. And if you have no agricultural ancestry, maybe your aging will stop in your 60s and you'll have the health of somebody who's about 50. Those of us with Eurasian ancestry in particular have had that really foundational indefinite lifespan messed up with. So maybe our aging won't stop until sometime in our 70s if we go all the way back to our ancestral diet from before agriculture. Now, there are many versions of that ancestral diet, not one. Some versions of that diet are practically vegetarian and are dominated by things like root vegetables, squash, nuts, fruit, and so on. Other versions of that diet can have a lot of meat in them, okay? And everything in between. So long as nothing is agricultural and nothing is the standard American supermarket poison diet, you can stop aging much earlier in much better health. And I know there are people in this room who are engaged in that project. Okay? That is what it means to think seriously, to live seriously in terms of the immortality concept that lies at the core of the evolutionary biology of aging. As opposed to what almost everyone else in the world believes, that aging is this relentless process that's coming here to kill you. And you need to relentlessly push it back and push it away using the latest drugs or stem cell treatments or whatever. In terms of my science and our data, which we published in 2020 and 2021, no, you don't have to have a good immortal phase in your life based on all the stuff that physicians might do. You can just do it with lifestyle. And of course, one of the components of that lifestyle is tribe, at which you excel collectively, okay? The other part is activity. You're very good on that as well. Third part, the diet, okay? No agricultural foods. Some of you struggle with that. I understand. I love cheese too, but there are nut cheeses. Okay. So you've heard me talk about this, 1 and 2. Step 3 is your relationship with medicine. Okay? Because we will all have literal accidents and figurative accidents. If you get in a car crash, that's a literal accident. If you develop a tumor, that is an accident of cell biology. Okay? If you develop a problem with your circulation, which may be trivially in your foot, more seriously in your heart or your brain, that's another type of accident. Okay? There's nothing about being immortal that prevents those accidents from happening. But when they do happen, you need medicine. Okay? So step 3 is having an immortalist medicine. And I talked about this virtually last year and at RADFest. So remember, your regular physician expects you to die. I mean, they are deathists, right? They're not thinking in terms of giving you the medications that would enable you to survive indefinitely. They're thinking about making your particular problem go away for a while, and the older you are, the less, they're committed to keeping you alive, right? So we need a better medicine. And in particular, a lot of what goes on in medicine is people in pharma companies lying to themselves as they develop drugs that are delicate, if not bad bargain to begin with, but then they fiddle with the data, fiddle with the procedures so that they can tell a story to physicians, to the FDA, and so on. And they use that story, which over and over again turns out to be false, to justify the marketing of a new drug from which they will make hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. Okay? And the stories they use to get those drugs approved to convince physicians of what's going on are almost never correct. But it doesn't mean that those stories are all that we have, because now we live in a genomic, transcriptomic, metabolomic era, the omic era, in which we can actually figure out what these drugs do and their side effects and their consequences, especially for those of us who would like to live indefinitely. Okay? So we're right on the threshold of doing this. By the threshold of doing this, I mean, this is why I'm retiring this year from the university, so that I can go into the development of an immortalist medicine. First step being to save you from all the nasty drugs that no one should take. Secondly, to try to find the best compromise between solving your acute problem, be it stroke, cancer, heart attack, kidney failure, whatever, and you're living indefinitely. All right? So that's all stuff I've spoken about before. And at the key of it is the fact of immortality, the fact that we all come from a lineage of cells that has been around for 1 billion years. Billion with a B. Okay? And yes, we go through a phase of aging, but it stops. Okay? And in general, those facts and those ideas are not accepted. Okay? So we just have to live with being a small group for now. All right? So everything about steps 1 and 2 are abundantly published. Okay? Our latest book has a lot on step 1 and a little bit about step 2. There's nothing about step 3. But the beautiful thing is the world of genomics is coming to destroy the lies, to out the lies of conventional reductionist cell molecular biology, which is, though it sometimes does good things for us, is probably the greatest threat to our indefinite lifespans. And the people you have at RADFest who still don't believe in immortality, they're not really your friends. They're not really going to help you because they still haven't committed to immortality as the central fact. Okay? Just like the Newtonian physicists of the 19th century couldn't accept that we couldn't go past the speed of light, could never sign on to modern physics. Just like the ancient astronomers who believed that everything revolved around the Earth could never sign on to the world of Galileo and Newton. Okay? It's the same basic Rubicon. The key issue is biological immortality. If you accept that as a scientist, you can't go back. And if you accept it emotionally, your life is transformed. Okay? Now I want to talk about step 4. Because everything in steps 1, 2, and 3 still involves a lot of risks. Because if you have the best ancestry, which is Australasian, maybe I can stop, and if you take my advice, maybe your aging can stop in your 60s and you'll have the health of somebody who's 45 or 50 on the SAD diet, okay? Which is fantastic because medicine can do a lot for people like that. So what step 4 is about is taking people like many of you in this room who are close to the cessation of aging or have actually stopped aging, okay? So I think some of you in this room have actually stopped aging. And you've stopped aging sometime in your 70s with the health that used to correspond to someone who is 60 or younger, okay? But things will get really awesome when we make you still younger than that, okay? The real thing is taking people whose aging has stopped at a pretty good health level, but not super young, and starting to make you younger, okay? So that with each passing decade of your indefinite lifespans, you are getting younger and younger, and you then can live longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. Okay, that's step 4. Okay, so what will step 4 look like? Step 4 will be complicated. There is no one single thing, the science shows, that will be the key to it all. There will not be one specific protein, not one specific metabolite, not one specific gene, but there will be multiple interventions. It will be cumulative, okay? And we've lived through this kind of transition many times. The first automobiles, made by Mercedes-Benz were, pathetic, not really particularly superior to a horse and buggy. If you had 2 fine horses and a very nice buggy made by a very good buggy manufacturer, if you know what a buggy is, it's a very small kind of carriage. But the cars got steadily better and the horse and buggy did not. Okay? You're actually also, you've lived through this in the transition from landlines, telephones to cell phones. Compared to the phone that I grew up with in the 1950s and 60s, the cell phone is a miracle, right? Okay. How many technologies go into a cell phone? Many. How many technologies go into a modern car? Many. You're also seeing the transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. That involves many transitions technologically, many limiting factors, all of which are going to be retuned. So here's some good news for my cell molecular friends. Yes, we will be using cell molecular technologies. It's not that everything that they've done for the last 60 years has been a complete waste of time. It has involved the waste of billions of dollars, mostly. But they stumble upon good stuff. They don't put it in the context of living indefinitely on a plateau of immortality, the way I think they should. They think of it, e.g. Aubrey de Grey, as having this exponentially rising risk of death that they're continuously trying to push down, push back, okay? They don't understand how the proper scientific and technological focus on immortality makes the whole project so much easier, so much more feasible. But nonetheless, they've created all these technologies. We can use all these technologies added onto tribe, diet, exercise, emotional connection to immortality, okay? Step 4 will be cumulative. It will start out slowly and then it will become exponentially faster and faster. But remember, if you have stopped aging, you're in a better position to wait, right? If you stick with the Doritos and the Red Bull and the vodka and the Twinkies, okay, you're racing toward death until you're 105 and your chances to make it to 105 are very small. The more you stop that process, the more you can wait for the step 4, which will be complicated, okay, cumulative, but I think in the end, spectacular. That will be step 4. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Michael. I was just thinking, the way you laid out these 4 steps, and tell me if I'm wrong on the way I understood this. We've been assistants been telling us, kind of like the inverse way of how you laid this out. Like first you'll do the interventions, then you'll do this, and then you might possibly shall reach immortality. But what you're saying, it's turning it on its head, and it's saying first you accept immortality, and then you can be on your merry way. It's that kind of like take on immortality first, and then.
I mean, I'll give you perhaps a parallel.
Yeah.
If you accept a Copernican world where the Earth is not flat, where it's a ball that rotates, then you can do stuff like, set out on oceans to find new continents or find another way to get to India or whatever you like. Once you've accepted reality, then it opens so many doors.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm reviewing a book right now for a journal where the whole idea of immortality, much less immortalism, is ridiculed. And that's the standard point of view.
It is.
It's like, we don't want to talk about immortality. No, that's wrong. Can't think that way. We'll just do these minor things. Okay? But, we're all going to die. It's like, guaranteed. No way around it. All right? Yeah, I start thinking that way as a scientist 30 years ago. I stopped thinking that way as a human being, starting from when I first attended a RADFest meeting. That's when I started to move away from that way of thinking as a human being.
Beautiful. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts going in me, but we have a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions, comments, okay. I'll hand this mic to somebody to go ahead and help me. Thank you. And then if you're online, you can go ahead and also submit your questions and comments. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, you step 3, you're retiring to get into what medicine did you call it?
Immortalist?
Immortalist.
Of course,
medicine?
I won't use that word in a context other than this one, but it means the medicine that deals in the true omic foundations of health.
That was going to be my question. Can you elaborate a little bit on context? What does that actually
Sure.
mean? How does that look like?
Sure. So in my now ending career as an evolutionary biologist, I took advantage of the force of natural selection to produce populations that can live 2, 3, 4 times longer. And then we look first genomically, how many sites in the genome are modified to produce radical extensions to lifespan on the order of 1,000, not 1, 2, 3, or 4. How many transcripts, that's the RNA that's taken off the DNA in the genome, are altered? On the order of 1,000-ish. It's a similar number, but it's not one-to-one, it's a crisscross pattern. I presented that crisscross pattern for the first time publicly at a RADFest meeting. I think it was 2020, might have been 21. And how many of the body's metabolites have to be altered in level or properties to produce double, triple, quadruple the lifespan? It's a scary number. It's about half. How many metabolites do we have? Estimates are between 50,000 and 500,000 metabolites. Okay. None of that fits with anything you've ever been told, okay? By conventional medicine, okay? By your typical RADFest speaker. It is bedeviling complexity. If we didn't already have AI, we would have to invent it to parse it. But hey, how does Google make its living? It makes its living by crawling all over the internet across millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of web pages, sites, and everything else to organize it for you and to hand it over to you. What will proper immortalist medicine be based on? The actual complexity, not the fictitious stories of cell molecular reductionism. Now, to be true, honest, the geocentric model that we had, for most of human history before Copernicus has always been true for one really obvious object, which is our moon. It's not that the geocentric model is always wrong. Furthermore, we put satellites in orbit around our planet. They're all geocentric, okay? In the same way, there are genetic diseases which afflict humans, which afflict a few % of people and cause their deaths or their severe suffering. It's not that cell molecular reductionism is never correct. It's just almost always wrong, almost always, just like the geocentric idea. In fact, the universe does not rotate around this one flat Earth that we subjectively experience, okay, even though we see sunrise, right? In the same way, there are elements of truth to cell molecular reductionism, and they've always wanted everybody to only focus on that. But now in the genomic era, that's been exploded. That has been destroyed because the genomic research, which is the fastest advancing part of all of biology and biomedical research, shows complexity, okay? It shows that it's a detailed, complicated network, not simple little pathways, which somebody can make a story about, like hallmark of aging. You know, Aubrey started with 7, it's now up to 10 or 11, but they're all stories. Stories are wonderful. Like earlier, as we were driving here, Leslie and I were seeing, you know, flashes of lightning. And I said, well, it's either Thor or Zeus who's being very active tonight, right? That's a wonderful story. Okay, Thor, Norse, Zeus, Greek mythology. Okay, now, you know, we know that's not true, but it's just very comforting and fun. So that's how I regard the vast majority of gerontology. It's comforting and fun. Sometimes it's true, you know, maybe 1% of the time it's true. As a rule, it's wrong. And genomics is destroying it. Genomics is destroying every type of reductionism in biology. Okay? And it's only by embracing the full complexity, parsing it with AI, and then taking all that information and, you know, connecting it to the way drugs actually work, not the stories, because we can use omic tools to totally unpack what drugs actually do. And we can say, well, yeah, that drug's really good for this thing, but it's going to screw up everything else in your health. Don't take it. If you're committed to an indefinite lifespan, there are a lot of drugs that no one should take, but there are some that people should. And we do have systematic ways of finding that out. That's what I'm starting on this year in terms of my principal activity. And that in turn ties into step 4, because step 4 cannot be based on cell molecular reductionist myths. Okay, it can't be. It has to be based on what's really going on, which we find out in step 3.
I have a question, Michael. How do you see this conversation? How do you see research and in the last, like, say, 5 years? Do you feel they're moving closer to immortality? Because we're like very monumentally moving quick. Like what's happened with AI in the last like 2 years in genomics is incredible. And how do you feel? Is that translating someone to?
Okay, so people like Aubrey de Grey, literally, and many other people less thoughtfully than Aubrey. Aubrey's a very thoughtful guy. He starts from erroneous premises, but he's still a very thoughtful guy. But basically their idea is, you know, we have this titanic exponential wall of death that's coming to kill all of us, and we will hold it back. For Aubrey, it's all about repair. Repair, repair, repair. Yet even he admits that you have this titanically complex metabolic problem of aging. Okay? And he talks about, you know, doing stuff that a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades will start to slow it down. He talks about getting to a longevity escape velocity, but it's still just about trying to hold back this panoply, this horde of cell molecular mechanisms of damage and destruction and dysfunction. In my world, that's not the problem at all, because aging is going to stop on its own. So the key thing then is to stop it earlier better, and to live in terms of having it stop earlier and better. If it's stopped, you have a completely different game. You can wait more readily, and it's a fundamentally easier problem to slowly rejuvenate a person who has stopped aging, as opposed to somebody who's like zooming toward death, and you've got to somehow slow that down, stop it, and hold it back. That's a really hard problem. I mean, I've been in the business of producing longer-lived organisms since 1977. So I know that can be done. But in the cell molecular worldview, which doesn't take advantage of evolution, doesn't take advantage of the power of natural selection to extend lifespan, and most importantly, does not accept biological immortality, everything is incredibly hard and mind-blowing. Oppenheimer, let me go back to that parallel. I don't mean metaphor, I mean parallel. Think of how hard it would have been for the American chemical weapons industry to load up one plane with a bomb or a set of bombs using chemical explosives that could wipe out a Japanese city. Okay, I mean, I know this is hard to think about emotionally. But that's only That's only a hard problem if you don't accept 20th century physics, if you don't accept E equals mc squared. E is energy, m is mass, c squared is the speed of light squared. That's a gigantic number, one of the larger numbers we'll ever encounter. That means that converting a tiny amount of mass of a uranium isotope or a plutonium isotope could release spectacular amounts of energy. And that's the world we now live in. Now, in that case, you could make an excellent argument that that was for the worse. But imagine that we turn that kind of scientific power around and say, biological immortality is there. It's there to be manipulated. It is there to be enhanced. It is there to be the foundation for the transformation of the lives of everybody who can accept biological immortality.
Love that. Bruce, you had a question or comment? Same question as Dimitri. Dimitri has another question.
If you don't mind. You mentioned a billion-year-old bloodline. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So as evolutionary biologists have believed for 140 years, whenever natural selection wants to produce an immortal cell lineage or an immortal animal or plant, it can easily do so. And we've always had immortal animals and plants that don't age at all living all around us. Stuff that cell molecular people don't like to talk about. These days they say, oh, that's because they have indefinitely proliferating stem cells. Well, they may not actually have any stem cells at all. That may not really be how their biology is organized whatsoever. Okay. But it's their way of trying to put it in a little box where they don't have to think about it. That's what 19th century physicists were doing with the speed of light being the universal speed limit. They didn't want to think about it. It's like they knew that fact, they didn't want to think about the consequences. Einstein was willing to think about the consequences of that. That led to modern physics. Okay? Intervening with the aging process in this century will critically rest on the facts of biological immortality, the exploitation of biological immortality, and using that as a foundation for radically extending health. Not just life itself, but health, function, life, fulfillment, pleasure, family, everything. And you can see Aubrey and I debate that online on YouTube, if you would like to.
Yeah, that episode I saw, the beginning of it, it was out making the rounds, and the comments were very interesting. So you can find that on Facebook. It's quite an interesting conversation to watch.